All right, today we are going to get into reproduction unit 2. So this is our part 2 of reproduction. I'm going to share my screen so we can go over our exemplars and look through the syllabus before I get started on chapter 11, reproductive anatomy and physiology, which really should be a refresher for you because you should already have a basic idea of reproductive anatomy. So let me share the screen. All right. So this is going to be the start of this. Our exemplars that we're going to be focusing on for this unit or this part is going to be pregnancy and placental complications. I do have my lesson plan down here for you. It did have chapter 16 on it. I took that off. So you may or may not see that in your lesson plan here that's downloadable, but we're going to be covering chapter 16 in the next part. All of this is going to come out of your maternity book because we already went over our reproduction concept at the beginning of this semester. But if you want to look at that again, that's going to be in concept 20 of your concepts book. Here's your PowerPoints. Those are from the book. I put those up there for you just in case you're one of those people that like to maybe print it off and make notes. Just do whatever is best for you. I don't go by PowerPoints. You probably can see that or you know that by now, but I do leave those resources up there. Here are some optional videos. These are good videos. If you are not understanding the way that I am telling you some of this content, if there's just something that it's like, I just don't get what Miss Miller is saying, please go look at some of these videos because they're good videos. Some of them are kind of boring, but they are good information and they may help you understand something that maybe I can't help. But I do always want to give you this disclaimer. If you are not understanding something that I'm saying or some content that we're going over, please, please, please reach out to me either via discussion board or email, please. Here's a skill, the Leopold maneuvers. I do want you to get a good grasp of those maneuvers, and that's where you can see what position the baby is laying in by feeling of the mom's abdomen. So that's one of the skills I want you to learn this unit, as well as, and I don't think I have it on here, but maybe there's a skill, there should be a skill in the book of putting on a fetal monitor. You need to know how to apply the fetal and the TOCO or the contraction monitor to the mom. Those are going to be the two skills you need to know. So without further ado, I'm just going to put up this reproduction concept analysis diagram here. Maybe. Okay, here we go. And we're going to get started on chapter 11. All right, so this is some of our anatomy and physiology. So it talks a little bit about sexual development and sexual maturation. So we know that the chromosomes determine what we're going to be. Are we going to be a girl or a boy? Do we have XX, which is a girl, or XY, which is a boy? That's determined the minute conception occurs. In childhood, the sex glands of girls and boys are inactive. puberty is when everything changes, right? Because that's when the sexual maturation comes along once they hit puberty. And I don't know, you may want to look up Tanner's stages of sexual maturity in this maternity book. It's not in this chapter, I don't believe. But that's just a good thing to kind of give you an idea of what that sexual maturity looks like with puberty. All right. So why people go through puberty at the time they do, why sexual maturation occurs when it does, remains unknown. You know, I can tell you that people are becoming more sexually or they're hitting puberty earlier. Girls are starting their periods earlier than ever in history. You know, 15 or 16 used to be a normal age back in the 30s, 40s, and 50s. Now it's not uncommon for girls to start their periods when they're 10 and 11. So that is a huge difference. You know why? Nobody can say for sure. I have several theories. For one, there's much better nutrition that we have, you know, not only at home, but they get good nutrition at school. What about all the antibiotics that we're using for our meats, for chickens, that these kids are ingesting their whole life? You know, there's just several different theories that I have, but who knows for sure why we're developing earlier, but we are. Primary sex characteristics. That's going to be what you're born with. That's a vagina, that's a penis. Those are your primary sex characteristics. That's a uterus and testes. So secondary sex characteristics then would be breast development, the development of hair, you know, under your arms, pubic hair. In boys, the deeper voice, the more musculature. Those are all your secondary sex characteristics. So just remember, primary, that's what you're born with. You have that at birth. Secondary sex characteristics are what happens or what occurs during puberty. Okay, I want you to look at the table, major hormones and reproduction. It's table 11.1. Some of the major hormones that we're going to be looking at are going to be your follicle stimulating hormone, FSH, and luteinizing hormone, LH. These are the two that we're looking at for our menstrual cycle. The female hormones that we're going to be looking at are estrogen and progesterone. So I want you just to have a good idea of that. The FSH, this is what it does. It stimulates the final maturation of the follicle, which is the ovum, the egg that's produced in the ovaries, right before ovulation. The luteinizing hormone then will stimulate final maturation of that follicle or the egg. This is the surge of luteinizing hormone approximately 14 days before the next menstrual period is what causes ovulation. Because you know, ovulation occurs mid-cycle, which is going to be important to know when you're looking again at your contraception that we've talked about in your natural family planning methods. So that's going to occur midway through the cycle. That surge of the luteinizing hormone is what causes ovulation. Estrogen, just look at the action, and I'm mainly for this, I'm looking at the female actions of estrogen and progesterone. Progesterone It helps the lining of the uterus stay in place after fertilization has occurred. And that's going to be really important for us to know when we're starting to talk about spontaneous abortion or miscarriage, because a lot of women maybe don't have enough progesterone, and it causes the shedding of that lining, which would, of course, shed that newly implanted embryo out. So progesterone is very important. I'm looking also at oxytocin. This is what stimulates contractions during birth and postpartum. And it also stimulates the letdown of the milk ejection reflex during breastfeeding. You probably have all heard of oxytocin because it's also what we induce labor with, right? Pitocin is synthetic oxytocin. That's what we use when we are trying to induce those contractions. And then testosterone, here at the very end, this of course is going to be the major male hormone. So I also want you to look at table 11.2, comparison of the secondary sex characteristics in females and males. Again, so you're aware of primary versus secondary sex characteristics. So puberty changes, girls go through puberty earlier than boys do. This is when I always say that funny middle school period or junior high period, where when they go in, you see these pictures and the girls are so much taller than the boys. It's because they've hit their growth spurt or their puberty earlier than the boys do. And then by high school, you see that kind of turns around. Then boys hit puberty and then they become taller than the girls. So girls generally hit puberty first. All right. Just looking a little bit at the female reproductive tract, really the main things we're worried about for the purpose of this course are going to be the vagina, the uterus, and the ovaries. In the female, the fallopian tubes are huge. That's where conception occurs. And the fallopian tubes are also what nourishes that newly formed zygote until it can get to the uterus and implant there. So fallopian tubes also are very important. Look at your support structures of the bony pelvis. This gives you an idea of where, like, the coccyx is, the symphysis pubis, the pubic arch. I won't be talking a lot about these, but the ischial spine, that's a very important one when we talk about the location of the baby. The ischial spine is going to be our landmark for determining the station. And I want you to look at ligaments. So we do have ligaments that hold that uterus in place. The round ligament and fallopian tube or the upper border of that broad ligament. And I just bring this to your attention because you're going to see a lot of pregnant women, usually about the time they hit around 20 weeks, halfway through the pregnancy, that are going to complain of like a sharp pain on one side or the other. And a lot of times that is going to be round ligament pain. That's because that uterus has finally grown and is getting outside of the abdomen and stretching those ligaments, and that produces pain. All right, the female reproductive cycle has different phases. You know, we know that it's regular and recurrent, right? We should have our menstrual cycle every month. The average is 28 days. That doesn't mean everybody is 28 days, but that is what they consider the average. So looking at the ovarian cycle first, your FSH and LH, and these are the hormones we just talked about, are secreted. That stimulates the ovaries to mature an ovum, the egg, release it and secrete other hormones that will prepare that endometrium, which is the lining of the uterus, that blood that will be expelled if no pregnancy occurs. So in the ovarian cycle, we have a follicular phase. That's which the egg matures. That begins with the first day of menstruation. So the very first day that you start to bleed, the follicular phase begins. And it ends approximately 14 days later. So midway through the cycle is when you're going to ovulate. So the follicular phase, it has stimulated that ovum. So at the 14 days, that's when it expels that mature egg. The ovulatory phase then tells you that the LH rises markedly. Secretion of SFH also rises. So ovulation marks the beginning of the luteal phase, which we're going to talk about here in just a second, of the female reproductive cycle, and occurs approximately 14 days. So the ovulatory phase, self-explanatory, right? That's when you ovulate. That's when that mature ovum shoots out into the fallopian tube. All right, then the luteal phase. So again, talks about, and look at this figure 11.7 about the female reproductive cycle, because some people are definitely more visual learners. So look at that. So after ovulation, the remaining cells of the old follicle persist for approximately 12 days, and that's called the corpus luteum. Again, that's the lining of the uterus. Says large amounts of progesterone are secreted, as well as some estrogen, to help prepare that endometrium for a fertilized egg. Every month, the female body is getting ready for a pregnancy. Says if the ovum is fertilized, it secretes HCG, right? Isn't that the hormone that we check for a positive pregnancy test? So it secretes the HCG if it is fertilized. And that causes the lining of the uterus, the corpus luteum, it causes that to stay in place and not shed. If it is not fertilized, the FSH and LH fall to low levels, the corpus luteum regresses, the decline of the estrogen and progesterone results in menstruation. So no pregnancy, everything's going to degenerate that was ready for a baby and shed, and that's what your menstruation is. Lots of other little different talk about, but this is the main ones as far as the hormones and the phases that I wanted you to look at. All right, and the female breast, of course, the breast is a reproductive organ because it is there for a function to feed the baby or the offspring. All right, so now our male reproductive anatomy and physiology. The penis and the scrotum are external, right? That's what you can see. And then the internal are going to be the testes. the male gonads, and they are what is housed in the scrotum. One thing about this is that is where they need to be descended and away from the body because they don't need excess heat. Any excess heat would either damage sperm or cause them to produce less sperm or possibly no sperm. This is why men in hot tubs when they're trying to get somebody pregnant is not a good idea. And I mean, that's about it for the reproductive organs. And sorry, but males are they just don't have as much going on or to talk about as the females do. So remember, at birth, a baby girl has all the eggs she's ever going to have. That goes back to, this is why it could be a problem when the woman is older and has old eggs and may have chromosomal abnormalities in the baby, remember, because the eggs are older. It talks about the female reproductive cycle is also called the menstrual cycle and some of the changes that go along there. And I'm in your key concepts here. Always read your key concepts at the end of every chapter because that really helps bring it all back together. And I want to start on chapter 12, conception and prenatal development, or maybe not. I'm going to start on that later. So I do want to again go over while I'm sharing this screen some of the things that I have here for you to watch before we start, or actually probably after you watch the chapter 12. I want you to go to modules. And this fertilization and embryonic development video. I want you to look at that because it's going to sound like I'm speaking Greek. I mean, I don't even like all the terminology that we have to talk about in this phase. But this video gives you a really good idea of what's taking place and what it looks like. Again, for you visual learners, this video is really good. And I'm going to move that actually down. I'm trying to keep this in a way where it all goes along with the lectures and makes sense. So anyway, that's going to be it for chapter 11. We're going to start back with chapter 12 next time.